This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fundraising Forum. Hopefully you can hear me. I can see a couple people on. If you just want to uh, signify that you can hear me, it would be great, either with like a thumbs up or post something in the chat. That'd be great. Just make sure that everybody can hear. Okay, fantastic. Wonderful. Well, again, thank you for joining us today on the Fundraising Forum. My name is Tom Brush, and I'm the CEO of Advancement Designs. I have been in the nonprofit sphere for about 25 years or longer, and feel like that now I have the opportunity to help other organizations out, provide a little bit of the insight and the wisdom that I've gained, and then share it with others in a way to help them find other things that they can do to be supportive, and find ways to generate more revenue, basically find clarity, direction, and generate more resources for their organization, which is hopefully what everybody is going to do. I have everybody muted at the moment, and just so everybody knows, I am going to do a little bit of an intro. Then I have a few questions that were submitted that I'll go through and try to answer, and then I'll open it up if there's some people who would like to ask a specific question or get a little bit of spotlight coaching on a question that they have. I'll let you unmute your mic, talk a little bit, and then we'll go from there. And hopefully we'll be able to help you out with your some of the things that you're thinking about. So today's topic is professional development. An important thing that I think often we overlook. Many times we are focused on what we're doing and our goals and our objectives, and we stop thinking about what is our career path and what are the goals that we're trying to achieve within our profession and within our career. And I think unfortunately that sometimes leaves people stagnant and really unhopeful that there is something better out there or that they can take their skills to the next level. Because I think all of us have the opportunity to acquire and gain experiences and skills that other organizations would be more than happy to have be a part of their organization. They can use to help the organization to continue to move forward. And sometimes that means we're going to go from a smaller organization to a larger organization, or we want to take a maybe smaller role at a larger organization that we're in and find a way to move into a more leadership role at a different organization. And sometimes we're just thinking about changing careers altogether. We either feel like we've accomplished what we can within one direction, and now we're looking for another direction, or maybe we just want to are tired of the role that we're in and we're looking to make a difference. And it's amazing how many people turn towards nonprofits when they feel like they really want to make some difference in their community, in their lives, and in what's going on in the world, which is awesome. And we need more people like that all the time, because as I say to organizations all the time, that the county, city, state, federal government could never afford to pay for the services that nonprofit organizations provide to their communities, to the nation, and to the world every day. Without those organizations, many, many people would be struggling and trying to find ways to move out. So kudos to those of you who are in the field, want to get in the field, or looking to do something to help support your community and your area. So the first thing I want to touch on briefly is just a trend that is a little disturbing, but I sort of understand it. And it's the length of tenure that people have at nonprofit organizations. I saw a study recently that showed that the average tenure, especially for a fundraising professional, was 18 months at an organization. 18 months. It was really hard for me to believe, considering most of my time I'd had at least 6 to 8 years in an organization, and the least amount of time in an organization was 3.5. And as I was thinking about that, I thought the challenges is that 18 months barely gives you time to get in and understand what's going on within the organization. And then to really make a difference, especially on the fundraising side, you've barely gone through a cycle where you see and understand what the organization is doing. You get to know the constituents. You get to maybe make some changes, bring in some of your ideas and thoughts. And then before you know it, you're moving on to the next opportunity. And I think that there are lots of reasons why this happens. One of it is, I think, some organizations aren't funded the way they need to be funded. And so people get in and get frustrated because they can't do what they thought they were going to be able to do. The other challenges is that many times nonprofits don't have the resources to pay a professional what they could get at other opportunities. And in the fundraising world, there are many, many jobs out there, many that pay very well. And so if your organization isn't able to support you at the level that other organizations are, many times people are going to get frustrated and leave. And sometimes they feel like this is just a stopping point on their way to whatever the next position is. And so I think that's one of the reasons that the time is so short. I think another challenge that's out there is supervisors. Many supervisors in nonprofits have never managed somebody in fundraising or have never been in fundraising themselves and don't really understand all the different things that go into a fundraising role, especially if you're a single person trying to do all the different fundraising, which would mean events, individual fundraising, annual appeals, major gifts, trying to understand what planned giving means, all of those type of things. And maybe your supervisor only understands some sort of metrics. And those metrics might just be, are we meeting our dollar goal for the year? And many times that is tough because donors, foundations, corporations can all say no. And we can't really control that. All we can do as fundraisers go out and make asks, put people in the position through cultivation and stewardship to hopefully get them to consider supporting the organization that we're with. And other times people have reached a management level when they just don't have experience managing people. They were really good at what they were doing. Maybe they were a great fundraiser. And then they were given the opportunity to lead a team of fundraisers, but they don't necessarily know how to manage each individual differently, because we all come at our role with different experiences, different knowledge, just different ways of learning. So it can be challenging for those people. So I think that's some of the reason that the tenure is as short as it is, at least on average. If you're fortunate and you have somebody who's been there a long time and has great relationships with donors and is able to understand their interest, understand the impact that the organization provides, it makes a significant difference in the fundraising opportunities that you're going to have. So that's a little bit about tenure. Now, if you move into professional development, I think a lot of times people think about that as finding a new opportunity. And that means that they have a resume, they've got some references, and they're able to write a cover letter. And I think that's important, but I think the question is your resume tailored to what the position is looking for? Not just what you think it's looking for, but what would that hiring manager be looking for? How much information have you included in the resume? Is it relevant to the position that you're being a part of? And do you really fit the description that's there? Or are you trying to help yourself fit the description that's there? It's interesting, I heard someone was telling me about some resources that talked about the difference between men and women. And pretty much men, if they see a job opportunity and feel like they have one or two of the skills that are being required, they'll apply for it all the time. Women, on the other hand, will look, and if they don't have nearly all of the required skills or expectations of the position, they won't apply. And I think there's some happy medium in the middle there, that often we apply for positions that we probably aren't qualified for. And I think there are other times and other people who don't apply for positions that they are definitely qualified for and would meet the majority of what the position is looking for. But I think too often we are either too hard on ourselves or we're not looking closely enough at the opportunity to understand what is the organization looking for and how can I make sure that my resume matches up with that. The same goes with references. If you're looking at a position that's going to be talking about supervisory experiences, you probably ought to have somebody on your resume or on your references that you've supervised. And you probably will want to have someone who's supervised you, because you're going to want those people to understand how do you work as a leader and how do you work as a member of a team as a part of that. Personal references can be good, but if they're not relevant and they haven't seen you in a work environment, they're not necessarily going to be helpful. And so making sure you're looking at who are the references you're putting in and how can they be helpful. Obviously, if you know somebody who's connected to the organization, that could be great, but that's not always necessary. So try to find ways to pull together all the possible references that you have. And most importantly, make sure that your references know that you're applying for the position, why you're interested in it, and that you've submitted their name. There's nothing like getting a call out of the blue that say, Joe Smith has put you down as a reference for this position, and you didn't know that, so you're not really prepared to answer that call. And likely as a reference, you're not providing the best reference that you could. So make sure that your references are aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Finally, your cover letter. It's interesting because I know that I probably, when I was reviewing resumes and applications, cover letter was the last thing I looked at. It's important. It needs to be without errors. You need to address a specific person, and you need to make sure that it's for the position you're applying for, not the last position and you forgot to change the title in the job. But in honesty, when I was looking at job descriptions or I was looking at applications, I would scan down a resume and pretty much know if this was someone I wanted to look at further because they had some of the skill sets that I was looking for. And so I think cover letters are important, but just understand that they may not be the thing that gets you in the door. Now, there are other people who they'll read the cover letter and redline it, and if there are any mistakes, they are not going to probably bring you in, or you're going to have a first sort of check mark against you if they do bring you in because they feel like you didn't take the time to understand and put together a complete and concise resume and cover letter. So that's a little bit about some of the technical stuff that I think that's helpful. Then I wanted to jump into briefly just about job listings. I'm sure we've all looked at them. There's more and more of them every day. It's very hard to understand what is an actual job that's been listed, or is it something that the organization has to do because of guidelines. So many times they have an internal candidate or they have another candidate that's already been pretty much selected, but for to make sure that they're fitting all the federal regulations, they have to put a job description out. And then being able to understand what's in the job description. And I really think that you can't always get a great feel on what that is until you look deeper at their webpage and understand a little bit more about what they're trying to accomplish, what they're doing, how it works. Take a look at it, especially if it's a nonprofit, they're 990s. You can do that by going, just search for Find 990s, and you can go in and look at an organization. And if you see that they're looking for a fundraising position, and they talk about both events and both individual giving, look and see, because in the 990, it will show how much money they're raising from events and how much money they're raising from individual donations. And so if you have a strong individual donation background and you're really good at soliciting donors, but the majority of their money comes in through events, you may be the right person because they're looking to shift that, but you might also not be, because they might be looking for somebody who really can continue to throw great events that has really been the driver in their fundraising resources. Similarly with grants, it'll tell you a little bit about grants and you can find out who some of their larger funders are. So don't just look at a job description and assume that you're going to meet the qualities and the experience that they're looking for as a part of it. I think that there's a lot of job descriptions out there that are very vague, or they're so detailed that nobody fits them. And really, they're probably not looking for all those things, but all of those things might come into play as a part of the job. But clearly, some of them are going to have more importance than others. And trying to identify and figure that out, much of which you can gain from going to their website. You can see a little bit of what their giving form looks like. You can see a little bit about how many events they run. You can understand more about what are they trying to accomplish. Maybe they have an annual report that shows kind of who their donors are, or what their giving levels are, so that the more you understand what they might be looking for, the better you can then put together information to put out there that others are going to see you as a viable candidate. So that's just a few things on my thoughts on some of the professional development things that are out there. We can obviously get into more topics. Please feel free, if you have a question, type it in the group chat, and I'd be happy to answer it as we're going along. This isn't completely scripted, but excuse me. I want to be able to respond to those people and make sure that the topics that we're talking about and the information we're talking about is helpful to where you are and what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm going to first now dive into a couple of questions. And please feel free, if you have a question, or if you would like to a little bit later unmute your mic and talk through a specific question that you have and spend a little minutes with some spotlight coaching, I'd be happy to do that. Just type your name into the chat and we will unmute your mic and give you a chance for us to have a 5 or 6 minute conversation about where you're at and what you're trying to accomplish. So the first question I got was from Sarah, and Sarah said, I'm looking for a role that has supervisory responsibilities. My current role does not have them. What can I do to try to gain that experience? Well, that's a good question, Sarah, and I think it's something that comes up a lot in job searches. How do we get experience if we've never had that opportunity? I see this a lot with fundraisers who have maybe done annual appeals or they've done events, but now they want to get into a position where they're asking for quote unquote major gifts or larger gifts, or they're going to go work on a campaign and people don't know what that means. And I would offer that the only thing you can do is talk to your supervisor, not the only thing, one of the things you can do is talk to your supervisor about, are there opportunities for you to gain experience by adding some responsibilities to your plate? So if you're the events person and you really like to do some soliciting, could you talk to them about, hey, I built a really good relationship with this volunteer. Would it be okay if and maybe I go with somebody, practice asking them for a gift and being a part of that conversation, just so I can understand what it feels like, what it looks like, how it might work out. And it's somebody you already have a relationship with, so you're not going in cold to the situation. The other thing I would say is look for volunteer opportunities where you could do the same. Maybe there is a smaller nonprofit that you're working with or some other organization who needs someone to provide some leadership to people. You can go in and be the head of the Boy Scout troop for your son, or maybe you can go in and be the head of the PTA at your child's school, where you can take on some leadership responsibilities and have a chance to understand what that looks like, and then you can provide that to others. You can also ask if you can take on leadership roles with volunteers. Because again, if you're able to manage volunteers, you're probably going to be able to have some good stories to talk about how you can relate that to managing a staff person as well. So I think what you want to do is look for those other opportunities and ask for experiences. Key to all of this is, where does your supervisor fit within your comfort level of talking to them about where you are and what you're up to and what you're interested in. I think too often we're worried that if we go to our supervisor and say, hey, I'd like to learn a little bit more about this skill or experience that I haven't had, they'll either think we're not busy enough and so they don't have enough work to do. They're unhappy with their current job and are just looking to change. Or maybe you've got a good supervisor who says, this is an opportunity for me to help them develop. Let me see how I can find a way to provide them with some experiences and opportunities. But you really won't know that until you've asked. And I think, if you go and talk to the person about generally professional development and how can you continue to grow and develop new skills while still being strong at what you have been hired to do, you'll get a pretty good feel for where that person is and how open and honest you can be with your supervisor about where you want to go, how you want to get there, and are they going to be someone who's going to help you do that? Or are they going to be somebody who you have to kind of find other opportunities to do that because they're mostly just concerned about you getting your work done in the role that you were hired for and what you're being paid to do? So I think looking in that question by Sarah, the real thing is, how do I find some other ways to do that? Supervising volunteers would be one. Asking for supervisory opportunities within the organization might be another. Whether maybe it's an intern or interns or other great groups, you bring them in, and really managing them sometimes is harder than a full-time person because you have to find tasks for them to do. And then you have to stay on top of them to make sure that they're getting complete when they're not necessarily there 24 or the full-time for 40 hours during the week. Or look outside of your organization for opportunities when you can take on that leadership role, whatever it might be, because then you can at least talk about you've had that experience, you have an opportunity to share that with a potential employer. Secondly, the next question we have is from Jim. He says, I'm looking to change careers and work for a nonprofit. How do I get started? Well, it's interesting. I think as I shared before earlier, there are many people who are now thinking about how do they bring their skills to the nonprofit world. And again, whether that's because they're just looking for something completely different, whether they want to change the world, or just change something that's going on in their own backyard. Or they've had a really successful career in other places and now they're looking to bring that success and knowledge to other other areas to help their community and the world. So I think the best way to do that is find an organization you can volunteer with. So before you dive in head first and know this is exactly what you want to do, you probably ought to try to experience what does that look like. So maybe you can sit on a board, maybe you volunteer for a committee, maybe you just go in and say, hey, I'm here, I'm willing to give a couple hours in the office to get a feel for what it's like in the organization. Because I think people look at nonprofits and feel like, okay, they're changing the world. That's exactly where I want to be, especially young people, or people who've been disillusioned by another career, without understanding that really nonprofits are still work, and it's not always easy, and you don't always have the resources that you need to accomplish what you want to do. So people do get frustrated, and they end up working long hours, and for sometimes not a lot of reward. Again, whether that's salary or recognition, it's just a very different world to be in. And so I think before you dive in and just completely change careers, have an understanding of what it is to be a part of it. Now, if you've already been a volunteer somewhere, now go out and look for those opportunities to take an entry-level position, or maybe even a higher level position based on your skill set. But likely when you're changing industries, you probably have to take a little step back to get some of that industry knowledge before you will be able to potentially move up to maybe the same level that you had in your other career field. But there are definitely opportunities out there. There are 1.5 million nonprofits. So there are people looking for workers, staff, volunteers to help them out. So never hesitate to go look for a volunteer. The third question we got was from Tara. It was about how much information should I include on my resume? And I think that's important. And I think this is a changing part of the professional development world. It used to be put everything you have on there. Then it was only put things on there that are relevant. Now, if you're a little bit older, only put things on for the last 15 years because you don't want to show your age. I am of the opinion that putting information on there that is relevant to the role that you're applying for is going to be most critical. And making sure that what's on there shows that you achieved goals, not just what you did. It's very easy to list that these are all the things that I did, but you want to be able to show what impact you had on that organization and how you achieved goals. And so you want to share with them what are the results that you got or the organization got as a part of your time there. And if you're not talking about results and impact, you're not necessarily going to have the same opportunities, because yes, a lot of people can do the work, but who can do the work and have results come from it? And so I would say that that's a key part of how you make a good case on your resume, is by putting in the information that's critical there. You don't have to put in every volunteer opportunity or every role you've been in and all of your school and all that, but make sure you have any of those things that are important. So if you've served as a volunteer on another nonprofit, put that in. Or you've been on a board, those things are important. But I would also say, especially depending on your level, and maybe if you're applying to be the executive director or the CEO, you might have more than a one-page resume, but likely all they're going to have time to do is scan down through a resume at first look, and then make a decision on whether you're somebody they want to talk to further. So if the resume is too long, they're likely going to get lost in that. Also, many times you're applying online, so making sure you think about what are the key words that this computer program is looking for in a resume, because oftentimes the hiring manager won't even see your resume because your score wasn't high enough in the computer telling you that you had the right information, the right experience, the right number of years in there to even initially qualify to be looked at by a person. So take your time to do that. Put together what's important on a resume, and make sure that it's clear, concise, and it's showing results and impact, not just what you did. Because I think too often we'll just list, I ran the annual appeal, or I solicited 50 gifts. Well, how much was it for? What was the time frame? How many asks did you make? What was your goal? Did you surpass it? By how much? All of those things that are in there that are important. And if you have gaps in your resume, make sure you can explain them. And it doesn't have to be, it's your explanation. It doesn't have to be anybody else's explanation. But you have to put in what was important to you and why you have maybe a gap in there that is explainable or not explainable. And I think people are worried about that, but it's amazing how many people nowadays have been let go from jobs. They've been downsized, right-sized, bought out. You probably can't go without 2 minutes without talking to somebody who's had that happen to them. And so don't be afraid if you have those gaps. It happens and people understand. Leadership comes in and changes, and it happens for a whole host of reasons. Just be able to talk about what have you done in between, so that if you have a longer gap, you're able to say, I did this is what I was doing through that time frame, or I was really looking for the right position and this is what it was, or my last job was really challenging and I felt I needed some time before I could then start looking again. So as long as you're able to explain anything on your resume, and I think that's an important point, don't put something on there that you can't talk about and you can't explain, because guaranteed somebody's going to ask you about it. And if you can't explain something that's on your resume and you can't talk with any sort of detail about your involvement in it, don't put it on. Because if you sort of can't really answer a question about something on your resume, that's going to be a signal to them that maybe you weren't as involved in this as you thought you were, or you weren't as much an important piece of that as you make it seem to be. So that's a little bit of our resumes. Hopefully that's helpful for Tara. I'm going to stop here for a moment and see, is there anyone there who would like to get on? I can unmute you and you can ask a question that I can try to answer. Just type your name in the chat if you want. All right, and you can do it at any time. Again, whether it's a question or whether you're in a situation that you'd like to get some feedback on, I'm happy to try to provide that for you. So I'm going to jump forward. The next question I have from Jane is an interesting one. How do I know if it's time to start looking for another opportunity? It's an interesting question. Sometimes it might be obvious. Your supervisor might come to you and really be pushing you on, for some reason you're not meeting your goals. For some reason you're not meeting the expectations that they have for you. Somehow they're just not happy. The two of you don't hit it off. There's a lot of things that might be a pretty obvious signal that you should look. But I'm going to take this, I think, in a little more positive way. Is at what point do you feel like maybe you've accomplished all you can at an organization and it's just time for you to start looking? People will say there's the 7-year itch, which I think is now down to about 5 today, when people are looking to do something different. And I think even with some people newer into the workforce, it might be 3 years and they're looking for a different opportunity because they feel like they've cycled through and have done sort of all they can do in that role. And I guess that to me is when you know that it might be time to start looking, is when you feel like you have taken your responsibilities to the greatest level that you can with the experience and the knowledge that you have, or with the potential that group of people have. I was in a situation once where I felt like I had been at the organization for 10 years and we had done a decent job raising money and I had a good portfolio of people I knew really well. But I also realized that I might have known them too well. And I might not have been as comfortable pushing my prospects to think about making larger gifts because I knew too much about their situations. And I was thinking more about what do I think they can do rather than what they could really do or want to do. And so I think that you get to that point where you say, maybe you need a fresh set of eyes to come in and look at this group of prospects in a different light and really start to understand where their real potential is and not have it be limited by what you know about them and all the details that can go into that. Because I think sometimes it is hard when you push people for a couple of years or for a couple of gifts. It's hard to go back and keep pushing when you know and you've asked them to stretch for a gift in the past. it's hard to then go back to them and think about continuing to stretch 2 or 3 times after that. And I think if you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling like you're not being heard, or ideas that you have are not being taken into consultation or being considered, that's a time when you might want to think about, okay, where am I at? What am I doing? And what do I want to do next? And I think really that's a time when you start to think about a strategy and putting together a plan of how do I go from where I am to where I want to be. And there's, I'll have to see if I can share my screen and show you these 3 pillars are things that I think are important to what's going on in the world and how we have success. And so I'm going to try to share my screen. I can't do it there. Huh. For some reason, I can't find it. I had it a minute ago, and now I can't see where it is to share my screen. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do it, but I can talk a little bit about it. One of the things that I've found in every opportunity where I've seen success or had some sort of achievement, there were 3 things that were a part of it. One is there were partners who helped drive my success. We can't do all of this alone. We need help from others. The second thing is the perspective. Again, if you're only looking at it from your perspective, you might miss out on signals that things aren't going as well as you thought, or they're going really better than you thought. And maybe now it's a time for you to think about your value has really gone up. And not only are you an asset to your current organization, but you might be a significant asset to another organization. And then finally, what's your plan? And I think putting a plan together is important, because you have to really understand where you're at, where do you want to be, and what are the steps you're going to take to get there. That will help you be more successful in achieving whatever it is you want to achieve, but especially within your professional development. Because at some point you have to evaluate what are the skill sets and experiences I have, and what are the ones that I need to get to where I want to be, for whatever that position, opportunity, role, any sort of career advancement, or just for your own personal satisfaction of knowing that you have more knowledge so that you can be more helpful to your organization, are important. So with that, I am going to stop. We've been on for a little over half an hour. And I'm going to just ask one more time before we move on to sort of the close. If anybody has any questions, if you want to put something down in the chat, I'm happy to answer a question. If there's a question about something else about fundraising that you wanted to quickly ask, we can do that. We have a few minutes left, because I want to make these as helpful for the people watching and listening as possible. So please feel free to do that, or unmute yourself. You're able to unmute yourself and you can ask a question. Give people a minute to think about that. All right, Lori asked the question, how do you suggest that a small nonprofit structure its development committee to help support fundraising efforts? We don't have a paid development director. Yeah, that's a challenge. Well, I think that, Laura, let me ask you, how many people are on the committee, and are they board members or they're just volunteers? Do you want to unmute, Lori, and we can have this conversation?
Tom, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So the committee is made up of all board members, and we have probably about 5 people on the committee, and we have it combined with our communications and marketing committee, because we found that a lot of the efforts that we were doing for the development and fundraising intersected with sort of getting the word out about what we do and connecting with the community and raising awareness. So, but we currently have all board members on the committee, some who are more active in being able and comfortable going with me to meet with a potential donor, and others who would rather, sort of help do sort of behind the scenes work. And
so you manage this committee?
Yes.
Okay, and are you the executive director, or?
I'm the executive director.
Okay, great. So I guess my first question would be, is do you have an overall goal for fundraising?
Yes, we have a fundraising plan that we developed several years ago, and as a part of the workshop that we're working on with you through the Osterman Family Foundation,
Yep.
developing an updated one.
Okay.
But so we do have that. We're in the process of developing sort of new targets.
Okay. So I think that the challenges are going to be is how much time do you have to allocate towards that? And then how do you best lay out your plan so that you can, one, identify what are the strengths of each of the members on the board? And then two, how do you take those strengths and then put them into action for the organization?
Right.
Because you're going to find that even though people have volunteered to be on the committee or they've been put on the committee, some of them are going to have different comfort levels for what you want to do and how you want to get it done. So I think the key is to take the plan that you're developing and then assign amount of how much time do you have to manage it and what is the priority for you within that part of your organization. Now think about, okay, what are the specific steps that I can take and when can I take them? And how do I maybe even carve out a specific time of day when I'm going to be focused on this? Say, I'm not going to answer email, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to whatever, but this is my time to focus on being a development director or the development director that you have. And you may find volunteers who have a skill set that could be beneficial to that, but you're also going to probably find some that don't.
Right.
The other thing I think you can do is really, once you identify what their skill sets are, assign some people to those roles and give them some very, I don't want to say easy to accomplish tasks, but don't make it too difficult for them because you want them to have success and feel good about what they're doing. So maybe say, okay, for the month, everybody has this assignment and your goal is over the month is to accomplish whatever that is. And then, so do you meet with this committee regularly?
Yes, we're meeting every 2 weeks now. We've stepped it up just because there's so much to do, and
Sure.
It helps us to keep on task and keep things moving along.
Okay.
And people, are away, they're volunteers, so they're not always available consistently. So as long as somebody on the committee is meeting every 2 weeks, we keep things along.
Okay. Do they all have tasks to accomplish within that 2-week time frame?
Yes, but I think we need to do a better job of connecting it, matching it to their skills.
Okay.
So I appreciate that suggestion.
What do the meetings look like when you have them? Is it just a reporting in session?
Yes.
Reporting out?
Yes.
Okay.
It's about an hour, and we go through sort of action items, look at the calendar, identify things we, need to work on that's coming up.
Okay.
Because we have a grant subcommittee, so part of it is feeding into the grant subcommittee, writing, things like that.
So you might want to look at that meeting. How is there information that you're putting together in that meeting that could be done outside of the meeting? Like, could you share a Google document that shares all that stuff, or has people's responsibilities on there that they could go in and say, this is complete, so that at that meeting, you're using the time to strategize more about how what you have coming up or what you've done, rather than just reporting in this, say, okay, Joe, give us an update on what you did, and Jane, talk a little bit about where you're at. Because I think sometimes those meetings then are, it gets easy for people to just start talking and they end up longer than they maybe need to be. And I think that if you have some of that information done ahead of time, then you could spend time on like bringing a list to the group that says, okay, on top of all those other things you do, here's a list of organizations that we're trying to get into. Do you know anybody there? Here's a list of our best donors. Do any of you have a relationship with that person? And how do we, talk about, maybe, and there's probably some people who are your donors who a number of people on that committee know. And how do we talk about a strategy for that person? Because if you spent 10 minutes talking about a strategy out of your best prospect, you might be able to put together a plan that in 3
Right.
months, you're going to ask them for a significant gift that's going to help you raise more money than all the other activities that you have going on.
Right.
So I would
No,
say
thank-
that's, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I just took some notes. That's very helpful. And I know some of these are very practical suggestions, but I think the committee has grown recently and we're taking on a lot more things. We need to be a little bit more systematic and use the time wisely.
Yeah. And I think just making sure you know exactly what are the goals and action items for the group, you know, so that even if somebody's, maybe somebody's finished whatever their current task is, they can already be thinking about, well, I know that we also need, you know, we've got a golf tournament coming up in 6 months and we're going to need sponsors for that. What can I do to think about and maybe start some of the legwork with who those might be?
Right. Okay.
Is that helpful?
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes. I don't want to dominate the conversation in case Danielle needs to ask something. So
No, that's okay. You're
Okay.
a couple of minutes in. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? All right. If not, we'll wrap it up for today. I'll give you a couple of minutes back. Hopefully you found some helpful tips within this time and that it was useful. Our next one is going to be in 2 weeks. It'll be on the 25th of June at the same time, 12:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be talking about online giving a little bit. So if you have questions or thoughts about that, send your questions in and hopefully you'll hop back on in 2 weeks. We'll talk again and hopefully continue to build some information towards your fundraising efforts. Thank you, Danielle. And thank you, Lori, for joining us, and have a great rest of the day. This has been recorded and I won't really share it with anybody except it will be on my site. So if you wanted to go back to the page, you can click and listen to the conversation, and unless something, Lori, that we talked about you don't want on there, then I would take that part off.
Fine. Everything's fine to share.
All right, great. Well, you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks again for taking the time out to join me, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.